beneath a suburban sky that turned from comforting to malevolent. A family's dream of a fresh start twisted into a nightmare woven with fireworks, pale sunflowers, and an alien gaze that pierced through the clouds. I'm David Harrow, and in the autumn of 1986, my wife June and I moved into a mirrored house on a quiet street, hoping to build a life for our newborn daughter, Janine. Across the street lived the Watons, Irvin, Aileen, and their 2 boys, whose arrival mirrored ours in time but not in intent. What began as a peculiar habit of late-night fireworks soon revealed a sinister ritual, one that summoned a swirling red eye in the sky, a cosmic entity that claimed the Watons in a horrifying ascent and nearly took me with them. Their pale, ghoulish faces, unblinking eyes, and animalistic fear of confrontation were only the surface of a deeper, more terrifying truth. A truth that left me with a scarred arm and a lingering dread that something still watches from above. Have you ever felt a neighbor's odd behavior shift from quirky to threatening? What would you do if the night sky itself turned against you, staring back with an alien hunger? The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves when June and I first arrived at our new home on September 3, 1986. It was a 2-story house on a cul-de-sac named Willow Lane, its white siding pristine under the late summer sun, its windows reflecting the golden light like a promise of better days. The street was eerily symmetrical, each house a mirror image of its neighbor across the pavement. Their identical designs a product of post-war suburban planning meant to foster community and conformity. Ours was number 12, and directly opposite, at number 11, the Watons were unloading their moving truck, their movements quick and mechanical, as if driven by a purpose we couldn't yet fathom. June stood by the car, her hands resting on her swollen belly, her auburn hair catching the fading light as she surveyed the street with a cautious smile. At 8 months pregnant, she was a vision of resilience, her green eyes bright with hope despite the exhaustion that clung to her like a shadow. "It's not so bad, is it, David?" she asked, her voice soft but tinged with the uncertainty we both felt. I nodded, forcing a smile as I hefted a box labeled kitchen from the trunk. "It'll be home soon enough," I replied, though the words felt hollow. The truth was, we hadn't chosen this place, not really. My job as a manager at a small packaging plant had forced our hand, a sudden transfer that left us with 2 stark choices: quit or move. With a baby on the way, unemployment wasn't an option, so we packed up our life in a matter of days, leaving behind the familiar streets of our old town for a place where we knew no one, save for a few distant relatives an hour's drive away. The Watons were a mystery from the start. Their mailbox, a weathered metal box on a wooden post, bore the name Waton in faded black letters, the paint peeling at the edges as if it had seen too many winters. We caught glimpses of them as they moved in. Irvin, a tall, gaunt man in his mid-50s, his bald head gleaming under the sun, his posture slouched like a hound too tired to hunt, his movements deliberate and slow. Aileen, his wife, who seemed far younger, her long dark hair trailing behind her like a river of ink, her face pale and expressionless, her eyes fixed on some distant point we couldn't see, and their 2 boys, perhaps 12 and 13, who moved with an eerie synchronicity, their pale faces and sunken eyes mirroring their parents', their bodies thin and angular, as if they'd never known a day of proper nourishment. They didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't acknowledge us beyond a fleeting glance that felt more like a warning than a greeting. Inside, our house was a blank canvas, its walls bare and its floors echoing with the hollow sound of emptiness. We spent the first few days unpacking, turning the sterile space into something resembling a home. June set up her work-from-home office in the spare bedroom, her desk positioned against a window that overlooked the Watons' house, a view that would soon become a source of dread. She was a freelance editor, her days filled with manuscripts and deadlines, and the office gave her a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos of the move. I, on the other hand, had no such reprieve. The packaging plant was a 20-minute drive away, a squat, gray building on the edge of town where I oversaw a team of 12, managing the production of specialized containers for medical supplies. A job that sounded mundane but had grown increasingly demanding with the recent influx of orders. I barely had a weekend to settle in before I was back at work, the Monday morning after our move a blur of paperwork and machinery, the hum of the factory a constant reminder of the life we'd left behind. Despite the chaos, there were moments of joy. June and I would sit on the small patio in the evenings, the air cool against our skin, the stars above us a faint scattering of light against the suburban darkness. We'd talk about the future, about Janine, about the life we wanted to build here. The Watons' house across the street was a silent sentinel, its windows dark, its occupants elusive. We assumed they were just private, perhaps shy, a family adjusting to a new place just as we were. But there was something about their silence, their absence, that felt wrong. A shadow that lingered at the edges of our optimism, waiting to take shape. It was the last day of September, a month after we'd moved in, when the Watons first revealed their peculiar habit. June and I were on the patio, a rare moment of stillness amidst the storm of new parenthood. Janine was due any day, and we were savoring the quiet, sipping chamomile tea as the night air wrapped around us like a blanket. The sky above was a deep indigo, the stars faint against the glow of streetlights, when a sudden flash illuminated the darkness. A firework exploded overhead, its white petals cascading in shades of cyan, a color so vivid it seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. The boom that followed echoed down the street, a deep, resonant sound that made the windows of our house tremble. June's face lit up, her love for fireworks, a remnant of countless Independence Day celebrations, sparking a childlike joy in her eyes. "David, look!" she exclaimed, clapping her hands, her laughter a melody I hadn't heard in weeks. "It's beautiful!" Another rocket followed, then another, each explosion painting the sky in hues of cyan and white, the colors blending into a cascade that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Across the street, the Watons were on their lawn, their silhouettes illuminated by the flickering light. Irvin stood at the center, a long match in his hand, his movements slow and deliberate as he lit each rocket, his bald head gleaming under the glow. Aileen and the boys stood in a semicircle around him, their heads bowed, their postures rigid, as if they were part of some ancient ceremony. For a moment, I shared June's joy. The display was brief but dazzling, a burst of color that broke through the monotony of our new life, a sign that perhaps this neighborhood held surprises we could embrace. We went to bed that night with a flicker of hope, thinking the Watons might be eccentric but harmless, their fireworks a quirky tradition we could learn to love. But that hope was a fragile thing, a glass ornament waiting to shatter under the weight of what was to come. The next day, Janine was born. September 29th, 1986, was a day of miracles and exhaustion. June's strength, a quiet force that carried us through the delivery. She was a marvel, her grip on my hand unyielding as she brought our daughter into the world, her cries a symphony of life that drowned out the sterile hum of the hospital room. Janine was perfect, her tiny face a mirror of June's, her eyes a deep green that seemed to hold the promise of 1,000 futures. I stayed by their side, ignoring June's pragmatic suggestion that I take an extra shift at the plant to keep busy. There was nowhere else I wanted to be. We brought Janine home 2 days later, our house suddenly alive with the chaos of new parenthood, the hallways cluttered with baby gear, the air filled with the soft coos and cries of our daughter. Life settled into a new rhythm, one dictated by feedings and diaper changes, sleepless nights and stolen moments of joy. Janine was a dream, the least fussy baby I'd ever known, her smiles a balm to our exhaustion, her tiny hands reaching for us with an innocent trust that made every hardship worthwhile. The house began to feel like a home, its walls now adorned with photos of our wedding, a painting of a lighthouse from our honeymoon, a rug in the hallway that always seemed to inch toward the front door no matter how many times I straightened it. But beneath the surface of our happiness, a tension lingered, a shadow cast by the Watons' house across the street, its windows dark and uninviting, its occupants a mystery we couldn't ignore. It was an ordinary Saturday, just past 1 a.m., when the Watons shattered our fragile peace with a vengeance. I jolted awake to a flash of blue light that bathed our bedroom in an eerie glow, the cyan hue seeping through the curtains like a ghostly fog. A thunderous boom followed, the sound so deep it seemed to shake the foundations of the house, the windows rattling in their frames as if trying to escape. Janine's cries pierced the night, her tiny body trembling in her crib, her wails a knife to my chest as I stumbled out of bed, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and anger. June, half asleep, mumbled something about needing rest, her voice thick with exhaustion as I scooped Janine into my arms, her sobs a relentless assault on my senses. I carried her to the kitchen, her small form pressed against my chest, her cries softening as I prepared a bottle with trembling hands. The window above the sink offered a clear view of the Watons' lawn, and there they were, Irvin standing in the grass, his bald head gleaming under the unnatural light of the fireworks, his posture rigid as he stared at the sky, as if waiting for something to answer. Aileen and the boys flanked him, their pale faces illuminated by the cyan glow, their eyes unblinking, their bodies still as statues. Another rocket soared into the air, its explosion a deafening roar that sent Janine into another round of wails, her tiny hands clutching at my shirt as if I could shield her from the chaos. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the kitchen window, Janine in my arms, her bottle forgotten as I whispered words of comfort that felt hollow against the terror in her cries. The fireworks continued, not every night, but often enough to become a torment. Every 3 days or so, a rocket would tear through the silence, its explosion a cruel alarm that sent Janine into hysterics and left June and me fraying at the edges. We tried to adapt, to find ways to shield her from the noise, stuffing towels under the doors, playing soft music to drown out the booms, but nothing worked. Janine's fear was palpable, her once easy smiles replaced by a constant wariness that broke my heart, her tiny body tensing at every unexpected sound. I tried to confront the Watons, my frustration boiling over into action. During the day, I'd stand by their door, waiting for their car to pull into the driveway, my fists clenched at my sides as I rehearsed what I'd say. But they were elusive, their house as silent as a tomb, their presence a ghost that haunted the edges of our lives. The kids never played outside, their pale faces never appearing at the windows. Aileen never lingered in the garden, her long hair never trailing across the lawn, and Irvin seemed to vanish into the shadows whenever I approached. It was as if they knew we were watching, as if they were hiding from us, their absence a taunt that fueled my growing anger. One night, after another barrage of fireworks woke Janine, I'd had enough. June was with her, trying to soothe her cries, her voice a soft murmur against the storm of our daughter's distress. I stormed out the door in nothing but a t-shirt and sneakers, my anger a wildfire that burned away any semblance of restraint. The air was cold against my skin, the street bathed in the eerie blue light of the Watons' latest rocket, its explosion still echoing in the distance as I crossed the pavement in a fury. "What the hell are you doing, Irvin?" I bellowed, catching sight of him on the lawn, a rocket in his hand, his sunken eyes wide with something that looked like fear. "What's wrong with you?" He recoiled at my words, his pale face twisting as if I'd struck him, and before I could close the distance, he sprinted for his door, his long legs carrying him with an unnatural speed. I pounded on the wood, my fists a drumbeat of rage, demanding an answer, but the only response was the sound of bolts and chains sliding into place, a fortress sealing itself against me. I stood there, my breath visible in the cold night air, my anger giving way to a creeping dread. The Watons weren't just eccentric, they were something else, something wrong, their fear of confrontation not human but animalistic, a primal instinct that spoke of a deeper, more sinister purpose. I returned home, my hands shaking, June's eyes meeting mine with a shared understanding. We were in over our heads, trapped in a nightmare we couldn't escape. As the weeks passed, the Watons' behavior grew more unsettling, their presence a constant shadow over our lives. I began to notice things about them, details that sent a chill down my spine. Aileen, who I'd seen tending to their garden one evening, had hair that trailed along the ground, a dark cascade that seemed to move with a life of its own, its ends brushing against the grass like the tendrils of some ancient creature. Her skin was almost translucent under the moonlight, her face a mask of pale, unblemished flesh, her eyes unblinking as she worked, her hands moving with a mechanical precision that made my skin crawl. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge the world around her, her focus absolute, as if she were communing with the earth itself. Irvin's face, with its drooping features and sickly pallor, was a study in decay. his skin the color of an old ham left too long in the sun, his cheeks sagging as if gravity had taken a personal interest in him. His movements were jerky, deliberate, as if he were a marionette on invisible strings, his bald head gleaming with a sheen of sweat even in the cool night air. The boys, who might have been twins but for a slight difference in height, shared the same ghoulish appearance. Pale, sunken-eyed, their faces expressionless, their bodies moving in a way that was too synchronized, too precise, like they were part of some unspoken ritual. Their eyes, like their parents', never blinked, their gazes fixed on some distant point, as if they saw things we couldn't, as if they were waiting for something to arrive. The fireworks continued, each explosion a dagger to our sanity, and Janine's fear grew with every blast. She'd gone from a quiet, cuddly baby to a bundle of anxiety, her once easy smiles replaced by a constant wariness that broke my heart. We took her to the doctor, hoping for a physical explanation, but the diagnosis was simple. Stress, lack of rest, the kind of thing that couldn't be medicated away when the source of her distress lived across the street. The Watons' actions felt deliberate, malicious, as if they knew the havoc they were wreaking and reveled in it. I watched them set off their rockets with a reverence that chilled me, Irvin bending to light each one with the care of a monk tending to a sacred flame, Aileen and the boys standing in a semicircle, their heads bowed as if in prayer, the cyan light casting their shadows long and twisted across the lawn, the shapes stretching toward our house like claws reaching for prey. June called the police and the HOA the morning after my confrontation, her voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and fury. She sat at the kitchen table, the phone pressed to her ear, Janine asleep in her bouncer beside her, the soft hum of the refrigerator a stark contrast to the tension in her voice. But our efforts were futile. The neighborhood bylaws had no rules against fireworks, a point of pride we later learned that might have drawn the Watons here in the first place. The HOA representative, a bored-sounding woman named Margaret, explained that the lack of restrictions was intentional, a way to foster freedom and expression in the community. The police were equally unhelpful, their tone dismissive as they explained there was nothing they could enforce, their voices crackling through the line with an indifference that made June's hands shake with frustration. It began to dawn on us why this house had been so affordable, why the street felt so empty despite the Watons' presence. This wasn't a place for families. It was a haven for those who thrived on chaos, who reveled in the freedom to disturb without consequence. We'd been tricked, lured by the illusion of normalcy, the mirrored houses a facade that hid a darker truth. The Watons had chosen this place for a reason. Their fireworks not a celebration but a ritual, a signal to something we couldn't yet comprehend. And we were trapped, our dream of a fresh start crumbling under the weight of their malice. Our home a prison we couldn't escape. For a brief moment we thought the nightmare might be over. Several days passed without a single firework, the silence a balm to our frayed nerves. Janine slept through the night for the first time in weeks, her tiny chest rising and falling with a peace that brought tears to June's eyes. We dared to hope, to believe that the Watons had tired of their torment, that we might reclaim the life we'd envisioned. But the Watons were far from done, they were just beginning. I was up with Janine one night, her small form nestled against my chest, her soft breaths a comfort in the darkness. I stood by the kitchen window, the moon casting a silver glow over the street. When I saw them, the entire Waton clan slipped out of their front door, their movements silent and deliberate, their pale faces glowing faintly in the moonlight. They gathered around the garden, the patch of earth Aileen had been tending, their eyes fixed on the soil with an intensity that made my blood run cold. And then they began to howl. It was a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard. A mix of a wounded pig's squeal and a panting dog's rasp. A chorus of screeches that rose in unison, piercing the night with a primal intensity. Irvin tore handfuls of grass from the ground, throwing them into the air like confetti, his face alight with a manic joy that made my stomach churn. The boys danced around their car, hand in hand, their movements jerky and unnatural, their pale faces twisted into expressions of ecstasy that seemed almost inhuman. Aileen fell to her knees, her hands pressed to the earth, tears streaming down her face in a silent, weeping ecstasy, her long hair pooling around her like a dark halo. Janine didn't cry. She just stared, her tiny brow furrowed, as confused as I was by the bizarre spectacle unfolding across the street. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, unable to look away from the Waton Ritual, their howls echoing in my mind like a warning I couldn't decipher. It was a celebration, a communion with something unseen, and the realization sent a shiver down my spine. The Watons weren't just strange, they were dangerous, their actions driven by a purpose that went beyond human understanding, a purpose that threatened to engulf us all. The next morning, June and I ventured out to see what had prompted such a display. Janine was in my arms, her tiny hands tugging at my beard, her curiosity a stark contrast to the dread that gripped me. We crossed the street to the Waton's garden, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth, the grass still littered with the remnants of Irvin's celebration. There, sprouting from the soil, were plants with large oval-shaped leaves, their edges tinged with a faint, unnatural blue. "Sunflowers," June said, stepping onto their lawn, her voice hollow with disbelief. "My mom grew these once." I frowned, shifting Janine in my arms, my eyes fixed on the plants, their pale, sickly hue a stark contrast to the vibrant flowers June remembered. "Sunflowers? That's what sent them into a frenzy." June nodded, her fingers brushing against one of the leaves, the blue tinge shimmering in the morning light like the scales of some alien creature. There was nothing more to it, just a patch of strange, blue-tinged sunflowers, and yet the Watons had celebrated them like a miracle, their howls a hymn to something we couldn't see. June called CPS that day, her voice shaking as she tried to explain the Watons' behavior. The phone pressed to her ear as she paced the kitchen, Janine asleep in her bouncer. But the authorities were unmoved. The boys were registered as homeschooled, and there was nothing illegal about cheering in your front yard or setting off fireworks. She was on the phone for over 40 minutes, her frustration mounting with each transfer, until she finally hung up, tears of anger in her eyes, her hands trembling as she clutched the receiver. We were alone in this, our fear a private torment that no one else seemed to share. I mentioned the Watons to a few coworkers, hoping for advice, but they had nothing to offer. They'd never met them, never seen the pale faces or heard the howls, their indifference a wall that separated us from the world. The most telling sign was Janine herself. She'd gone from quiet and cuddly to fearful and anxious, her tiny body tensing at every sound, her eyes darting to the windows as if expecting the Watons to appear. We were prisoners in our own home, our dream of a fresh start replaced by a nightmare that grew darker with each passing day. The Waton silence didn't last. It was early November, the air heavy with the promise of rain, the sky a bruised gray that seemed to press down on the world. I was at the kitchen window, Janine asleep in my arms, her soft breaths a comfort in the darkness, when I spotted them. Irvin and his oldest boy were stockpiling small, dark boxes in their yard, arranging them in an 8-by-8-foot grid with a precision that sent a shiver down my spine. They worked for hours, their movements methodical, their pale faces illuminated by the faint glow of a lantern, their eyes fixed on the task with an intensity that made my blood run cold. Irvin stepped up to their living room window, his hands slapping against the glass with a slow, deliberate rhythm, the sound carrying across the street like a drumbeat of doom. Moments later, Eileen and the younger boy joined them, their knocks echoing in the stillness, an uncanny ritual that made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone, recording the scene, my heart pounding as I watched them step back, all but Irvin, who held up a lighter with a reverent slowness, his bald head gleaming in the lantern's light. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They were setting up fireworks, the largest batch I'd ever seen, a grid of rockets that promised a display unlike anything we'd endured before. I rushed to June, who was half asleep in our bedroom, Janine stirring in her crib, her tiny hands reaching for the air. "They're lighting them," I said, my voice tight with panic, my hands trembling as I set my phone down. "It's going to be loud." June sat up, her eyes wide with fear, her auburn hair tangled around her shoulders, her face pale in the dim light. We moved to cover Janine's ears, hunching over our own as best we could, bracing for the inevitable, our bodies tense with anticipation, our breaths shallow in the stillness. The barrage was apocalyptic. Rocket after rocket soared into the sky, at least 24. Their ascent a series of thumps that shook the house, the vibrations traveling through the floor and into my bones. For a moment, they hung in the air, silent, and I dared to hope they'd failed, that some small mercy would spare us. Then the sky exploded, a blinding light that turned night into day, illuminating every detail of our bedroom. The pile of clothes in the corner, the diapers on the changing station, June's terrified face as she clutched Janine, her eyes wide with a fear that mirrored my own. The sound followed, a deafening roar that felt like a physical blow, rattling the windows and sending a painting crashing to the floor, its frame shattering into splinters that scattered across the hardwood. My ears rang, a screeching noise piercing through my skull, my balance thrown as I stumbled against the wall, the world tilting around me like a ship in a storm. The noise was relentless, a high-pitched whine that seemed to originate from the back of my head, traveling down my spine like a current of electricity, my vision blurring as I fought to stay upright. Janine was safe, her cries muffled by our hands. But I was a mess, my head spinning, the screeching in my ears a torment that drowned out everything else. June was shouting something, her lips moving in a frantic rhythm, her eyes wide with panic, but I couldn't hear her, couldn't hear anything but the relentless noise in my head. A sound like two frayed cables rubbing together, sending sparks through my mind. June pressed 2 fingers to her ear and mouth, signaling a call, and she scooped Janine into her arms, heading for the hallway, her movements quick and desperate. I followed, my legs unsteady, my pulse a drumbeat in my chest, the only sound I could feel amidst the chaos. The scene outside was a nightmare. The Watons were dancing in their yard, their pale faces alight with a twisted joy, their movements jerky and unnatural, the blue-tinged sunflowers swaying in the wind as if alive. A fresh crack had spiderwebbed across our bedroom window, casting a jagged shadow on my reflection, and the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against the pavement in a silent rhythm, the sound lost to the screeching in my ears. I called out to June, my voice a deep rumble I couldn't hear, my breathing and pulse the only sounds in my fractured world, my chest tight with a panic I couldn't name. Then June froze, her finger pressed to her lips, her eyes wide as she pointed to the door, her face pale in the dim light. There was a shadow outside, a dark silhouette against the sudden downpour, its shape obscured by the rain, its presence a threat that sent a spike of fear through me. We stood there, frozen, June clutching Janine to her chest, her gaze darting between me and the door, her breathing shallow and quick, her hands trembling as she held our daughter. I turned to the kitchen, my eyes landing on the knife block, June's nod a silent command to arm myself, her face a mask of determination despite the fear in her eyes. We didn't know what the Watons were capable of, but we weren't taking chances, our instincts honed by weeks of torment, our minds racing with the possibilities of what might come through that door. The door shook, a violent tremor that sent vibrations through the floor, a deep thud that I felt in my chest, and I grabbed a knife, my mind racing with possibilities. Irvin might have a weapon, might be threatening us, might be ready to escalate this nightmare into something even worse. The door gave way with a crash, splintering under Irvin Waton's weight as he pushed through. His sickly features twisted into a smile that chilled me to the bone. His bald head gleaming in the dim light, his sunken eyes unblinking as they fixed on me. June locked herself in the bathroom with Janine, her phone in hand, her movements quick and desperate as she slammed the door shut, the lock clicking into place with a sound I felt rather than heard. I faced Irvin alone, the knife trembling in my grip, my heart pounding as I took in his towering form, his arms impossibly long, his reach a spider's web closing around me. His left hand grabbed my bicep, a thick, sticky warmth searing my skin like glue, the sensation of burning agony that made me gasp. My arm trapped in his grip as he dragged me into the rain, his body convulsing with a silent laughter I couldn't hear but could feel in the vibrations of his chest. I fought back, slashing at him with the knife, but his skin was like rubber, unyielding and tough, my blade glancing off with no effect, the metal scraping against his flesh with a sound I couldn't hear but could imagine. A dull, grinding noise that spoke of something inhuman beneath his pale exterior. He pulled me into the middle of the street, the rain soaking through my clothes, the cold water a shock against my skin, the other Watons watching from their driveway, their faces upturned to the sky, their expressions a mix of ecstasy and reverence. Behind them, the sunflowers glowed with an unnatural light, their blue edges shimmering as if alive, the plants swaying in the wind like sentinels of some ancient ritual, their presence a silent witness to the horror unfolding. Irvin looked down at me, his lips moving, his head nodding with an intensity that sent a spike of fear through me, his sunken eyes alight with a joy that was utterly alien. I shook my head, unable to understand, my mind a fog of pain and panic, and he nodded again, more forcefully, as if commanding me to comply with some unspoken demand. His grip on my arm tightening, the sticky warmth spreading like a living thing across my skin. Then I felt it, a draining sensation, like the life was being sucked out of me, my energy fading in a single breath, my body growing heavy as if gravity itself had turned against me. The rain reversed, and a pour that defied logic, sucking droplets back into the sky, the water rising in shimmering tendrils that caught the light of the street lamps, a surreal dance that painted the night in shades of silver and shadow. I looked up and my blood ran cold. There, in the clouds, was a swirling red light, an eye that seemed to peer into my soul, its gaze a weight that pressed down on me, unblinking and malevolent, its crimson glow pulsing with a rhythm that matched the beating of my heart. The Watons began to rise, their bodies gliding upward as if on invisible strings. Aileen and the boys first, their forms silhouetted against the crimson glow, their pale faces alight with a twisted ecstasy, their hands outstretched as if reaching for the light. Then Irvin, his grip on my arm tightening as he ascended, pulling me with him, my feet lifting from the ground, my body dangling in the air as the street fell away beneath me. I was 3 feet off the ground, my toes no longer touching the pavement, my heart pounding as I looked into Irvin's ecstatic face, his unblinking eyes alight with a joy that was utterly alien, his bald head gleaming in the crimson light, his smile a rictus of triumph. The red eye in the sky pulsed, its light intensifying, and I knew I had to act. With a desperate surge of strength, I drove the knife into my own arm, cutting through the flesh where Irvin's hand had fused to me, the pain a white-hot agony that brought me crashing back to the ground, my blood mixing with the rain as it fell upward, a macabre dance that painted my vision red. I hit the pavement hard, my ankle twisting beneath me, the impact sending a jolt of pain through my body, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I clutched my bleeding arm, the knife slipping from my fingers to clatter against the asphalt. Irvin reached for me as he ascended, his hand outstretched, his face a mask of devastation and guilt, as if he couldn't understand why I'd fought him, as if he believed he was saving me. His fingers waved, a final plea, before he disappeared into the light, the Watons vanishing into the crimson glow, their forms swallowed by the swirling eye in the sky, the night falling silent once more, the rain ceasing as if it had never been. I lay there, my body trembling, my arm a bloody ruin, the screeching in my ears a relentless torment, the red eye fading into the clouds, its gaze lingering like a promise of return. June had called the police, and they arrived as the rain ceased, their lights cutting through the darkness like a lifeline, their sirens a sound I couldn't hear but could feel in the vibrations of the ground. I was a mess, my ears still ringing, my arm a bloody ruin, a hand-shaped scar already forming where Irvin had grabbed me, the skin puckered and red, a permanent reminder of the nightmare we'd endured. The paramedics bandaged my arm, their voices muffled by the screeching in my ears, their faces a blur of concern as they loaded me into an ambulance, June and Janine following in a squad car, their expressions a mix of relief and terror. The Watons were gone, their house abandoned, the blue-tinged sunflowers the only evidence of their presence, their pale leaves shimmering in the moonlight like the scales of some alien creature. A year later, their property was bought by an industrial machining company, the land repurposed for something cold and mechanical, the house torn down to make way for a warehouse that loomed over the street like a monument to our ordeal. We were bought out too, moving far from that cursed street. Even though the financial loss stung, our savings depleted by the hasty sale, our dreams of a stable future tarnished by the cost of escape. Janine is in middle school now, her laughter a bright spot in our lives, her green eyes a mirror of June's, her smile a reminder of the love that carried us through the darkness. But the scars of that night linger, both physical and emotional. My arm bears the mark of Irvin's grip, a hand-shaped scar that aches on rainy days, a constant reminder of the horror we faced. I can't look at the sky on rainy nights without feeling Irvin's grin staring back at me, without seeing that red eye in the clouds, a malevolent presence waiting for something bright enough to guide its path, its crimson glow a promise of return. Sometimes, in the distance, I catch a glimpse of it, a crimson glow dreaming across the night sky, a reminder of the Watons and the horror they brought into our lives, a shadow that follows us no matter how far we run. We're packed and ready to leave this place behind, our car loaded with suitcases, our children Haley and Jack in the back, their faces lit by the glow of their tablets as we drive to Autumn's parents' house for the holidays. The road stretching out before us like a lifeline, a chance to escape the memories that haunt us. It's a long road ahead, but we're together and that's enough for now. But I can't shake the feeling that the red eye is still out there, watching, waiting, its gaze a weight that presses down on me, a cosmic hunger that knows my name.